I do ask for your prayers during this message because it's a tough one for us to deal with. And I usually preach from notes, but I wrote this as a manuscript, so I won't have as good eye contact as I often do when I'm here with you. But there are important things to say, and I wanted to say them in a specific way. Oh, well, that was interesting. I must be in another room over there, so. Yeah. I think everything's good here, I believe so. At times of unexpected death, or when there is any time of death, we say things, think things, or have things said to us that are meant to give comfort or that try to explain why the death occurred. Some of these statements, without our knowing it, are very wrong in terms of our Christian faith, whereas others are very right. In the light of the untimely death of Tim Kellenbach and your desire to minister to Pastor Marianne and Carl, I'd like to try to address some of those things today and have entitled this sermon, Dumb Things People Say When Someone Dies, When You Are Only Trying to Help. Dumb thing number one. In 1993, a young woman named Susan Smith killed her two sons, ages 3 and 1, by letting them drown when her car rolled into a lake. She, a very troubled person, said she had intended to die as well. It certainly was a terrible tragedy, and Susan is in prison because of it this very day. At the funeral for those toddlers, the pastor said something like this: God wanted those boys with him in heaven, and now they enjoy eternity with Jesus. Well, I almost leapt out of my skin when I heard him say that. And on the Sunday following that funeral, I stood before the congregation I served at the time and said, that is absolute bunk. Not the part about being with Jesus, but the part about God wanting them in heaven. Why is it bunk? Because it sets up God as a murderer. A close second thing to dumb thing number one is God needed your mommy more than you did, which I once heard said to a child at a funeral. That one sets God up as a kidnapper. Either one tells us that God caused those boys or their mother to die with the motive of getting them to heaven as quickly as possible. God comes across as awfully hard to warm up to. And how do you love a God like that who would deliberately steal away loved ones? Now, no doubt God did allow that 3-year-old and 14-month-old to die because God had given their mother free will. And she chose to exercise it in such a way that she killed her children. When God gave humanity the precious gift of free will, that meant God put God's self in a very difficult situation, needing to watch people sin and make very wrong choices without usually intervening. So it was the day those children drowned. God watched, wanting desperately to stop it from happening, perhaps even trying, for all we know, by talking to their mother and getting her to change her mind. Was that the way God felt as Tim Kellenbach was falling? When those boys died, when Tim died, God wept. How do I know this? Smart thing number one, God is love. 1 John 4, verse 16, God is love. This statement makes God more than an entity separate from us and so apart from us. It makes God the love energy, the life energy, the Christ energy in which we swim every day. God is love. And since God is love, God loved those little boys very much. God loved Tim very much. To have them die, those boys die alone and afraid, to have them die so young, broke God's heart. Dare we say that God's will is for each human being to have a long life filled with as much joy as possible? I say yes, and hence God's heart broke when 46-year-old Tim died. Dumb thing number 2. It must have been his time to go. We hear this one a lot, so much so that many of us have probably said it, because if it is said often enough, it must be true. Or if you read it on the internet, it must be true, right? Well, why is it a dumb thing to say? It seems to make sense. When your number is up, and that's all there is to it. It's wrong because, once again, it denies that God is love. As Christians, we believe that God is intimately involved in our lives. There is a give and a take between us and God. It's a dynamic relationship that can grow and delight both God and us. Where's the give and take if God has already decided when we will die? How do we love a God who may be plotting our demise tomorrow or next month because of some prior decision made by God for some unknown reason? Could we even imagine God deciding that last week he was going to make Tim fall and get paralyzed? Of course not. Was the number up for the 3,000 plus people who died on September 11th? And how about the children who die in what seems every week a school shooting? Or the millions of people who have died across our planet from COVID? Or the young man who was sleeping on the sofa when the no-knock raid came in Minnesota and led to his death? Is God right now plotting the death of Ukrainians? If any of that horrible stuff is due to God, then what about the same kids in the schools who did not die? Or the people who escaped the towers? Or folks who survive a plane crash? Is it just that their number was not yet up? This thinking is madness, so I ask you to throw it in the trash right now and never bring it out again, because such fatalistic thinking does not make sense for us as believers in Christ. To think of God as prearranging our time to die is to see God as capricious, which means tending to change abruptly or without apparent reason. To be capricious is to be flighty. Smart thing number 2 is this: the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. Psalm 18, verse 2. Does that sound flighty and changeable to you? The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. No, God is solidly unchangeable in God's love for us. God would never deliberately rob a person of life based on some predestined plan. One reason people tend to think in terms of it was her time to go is that following a death, things change. People are different and often for the better as they adjust to the loss. Therefore, folks think that God predestined that person to die so that good things could come about. Well, let us remind ourselves of an important verse from Romans 8:28. We know that in everything God works for good for those who love him. In other words, God can bring good out of bad situations. That's what we call resurrection in this life. New life from situations of death and heartache. But do realize that we get ourselves in enough trouble without God needing to orchestrate new things in order to teach us. The brokenness of our world, which shows itself in diseases and accidents, will occur. God surely does not need to orchestrate disasters to help teach us or bring some good things to us. God can use the troubles and sufferings that already will happen to bring about good. God does not need to cause it. Such reasoning helps us to dispute dumb thing number 3. It must have happened for a reason. I hate that phrase. Really do. Is that true? It must have happened for a reason? Absolutely not, I say. With the horror of the Holocaust, when 6 million Jews were murdered, among them 1.5 million children, I don't think anybody can ever say that it happened for a reason. What was the reason for the lynchings of thousands of Americans because of their skin color? Evil was the reason, and greed and power, none of which come from God. Once again, dumb thing number 3, it must have happened for a reason, sets God up as a deliberate killer for the reason of teaching us or bringing about some greater good. Remember that God says to us in the commandments, "You shall not kill." Surely that tells us that God values human life, not wanting us to treat it lightly. And God is our heavenly parent. What good parent kills one of his or her children or millions in order to teach a lesson to the other kids? I think you see my point. God does not kill. God is love. Now let's move on to the smart things a Christian can say and believe when someone dies. We've already heard several of them. God is love. God does not kill. God does not need to orchestrate trouble to teach us a lesson or bring about a greater good. God weeps with you in your grief because God is your friend. Even more so, God is your mother, your father. Ezekiel 18:22 says, God takes no pleasure in the death of anyone. But the number one most important thing to say and believe and remember when faced with death is this: death is God's enemy. Here I speak of death as meaning the end, kaput, no more. That's all she wrote. There is nothing else. That way of looking at death is what Kierkegaard said sends a tremor up and down your spine, more powerful than the shaking of Vesuvius, the volcano. When we think of death as nothing more. We all know that terror because we felt it and thought it, and it's awful. But in 1 Corinthians 15:26, St. Paul wrote to the believers, and there called death God's enemy. With all of the preceding things said about death and God, we can see that God will never kill anyone. Killing someone would be consorting with the enemy, death. We must remember that death is more than a body stopping breathing, because there are deaths while we're still alive. I usually refer to them as mini deaths throughout our lives, death showing itself in the awful way humans treat each other. The mini death showing itself in the endless warring in the Old Testament, that was interpreted as God's will. We would need to have a Bible study to unpack all of that. It shows itself in our decaying bodies and the ravages of age. Many deaths show itself in the imperfection of creation, shows itself when a marriage fails, shows itself in addiction and in mental illness. But know this, God is diametrically opposed to such terror and such death. The many deaths in our lives and the kaput, nothing more, fear of death. All the ways of death that besiege us are the very reason that God came to us as Jesus, to fight the enemy of death and to win. And the win is God's gift, a resurrection in this life from the many deaths that happened to us while our heart is still beating and we are in this life, and when our body stops breathing. 1 Corinthians 15 is St. Paul's wonderful attempt to explain a lot of things about death and resurrection. Might want to read it today, 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says to people who are questioning whether Jesus was really raised from death, and he says, of course Jesus was raised from death, and that enables all of the rest of you to do the same. And then he says, but let me tell you something wonderful, a mystery I'll probably never fully understand. We're not all going to die, but we are all going to be changed. You hear a blast, to end all blasts from a trumpet, and in the time that you look up and blink your eyes, it's over. On signal from that trumpet from heaven, the dead will be up and out of their graves beyond the reach of death, never to die again. When Jesus died on the cross, it looked as if the enemy had triumphed over God by killing Jesus. But God had another plan, resurrection. Hence, Jesus' death and resurrection are God's way of beating down death forever. The power of death has been killed on the cross forever. Therefore, when faced with a sudden death, with death because of disease, with death due to old age, with death due to an accident, with the death of a relationship that makes you dark and hopeless, know this: God has faced that awful enemy and won. And God brings us back to life. That's resurrection. Hopefully you have experienced that in your life. God brings you back to life. That's the victory. That is God wiping away our tears. That is God laughing in the face of the enemy. And that victory is our hope. I want to end with a lovely image for you all to ponder. Randy Alcorn wrote in a blog and told the following story that helps him when he thinks of the death of a person at the end of their life, no matter what the circumstances. I'm standing on the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She's an object of beauty and strength, and I stand and I watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of a white cloud just where the sea and sky come down to mingle with each other. And then I hear someone at my side saying, "There, she's gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight, that is all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side, and just as able to bear her load of living freight to the place of destination. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at that moment when someone at my side said, "There, she is gone," there are other eyes watching her coming, and there are other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here she comes." And that, for the Christian, is dying. Imagine on this past Friday, Christ and the saints were looking at Timothy Kellenbach and saying, "Here he comes." Amen.